For the seed bank, we've collected from the Arctic to the Antarctic and from sea level to above 5,000 meters and every habitat in between. And it's one of the things that always amazes me is the enthusiasm and dedication of our staff and also our partners to go out to these remote, often locations. Well, sometimes it's remote, sometimes it's by the side of a motorway. There was one species we were looking for and they thought they weren't going to be able to find it. They were on a train at some point, looked out the train window and went, hang on, that's the species I've been looking for. So sometimes they're in very built up urban environments potentially, but sometimes they're super remote and you have to take a dugout canoe or an elephant or a helicopter to get there.
How are you, Elinor? Welcome.
Well, thanks for having me.
Those are some pretty seeds behind you.
Yeah, it's a nice backdrop. It certainly hides a whole lot of mess that is actually behind me.
So, Elinor, what does it mean to run the seed bank? And what about this particular seed bank?
Well, for me, it means a huge privilege. I see the Millennium Seed Bank at the Royal Botanic Gardens Kew as one of the most important conservation efforts that's happening at the moment on our planet. And it's really vital that we do this work. And I'll explain a bit about how we conserve seeds and how that helps conserve plants. But 2 in 5 plants are currently threatened with extinction. And so we need initiatives like the Millennium Seed Bank to help conserve those plants and prevent them from going extinct. But more than that, it also provides us with an opportunity to study those plants and help try to find some solutions to other issues that we're facing.
So what kind of seeds, what's an orthodox seed and what kinds of seeds are you storing in this particular place?
We only store seeds from wild plant species, so that separates us from other gene banks which are looking at agricultural species. So we're really about that kind of conservation of wild flora. You mentioned orthodox seeds, and those are the ones which can withstand drying and then freezing. So our seed bank methodology is to collect the seeds from the wild. We take them back to the bank, then we dry them down to about 15% relative humidity. So it's kind of like the cabin on an aeroplane.
A lot of seed banks have already had to have their seeds taken back to a place where there was famine or fire. Do the seeds just go one way, or if something happens, do you send them back to a place to be repopulated?
No, completely. It's exactly like a bank. So you can make deposits and withdrawals. And I think the other interesting thing about this seed bank is because we work in global partnership and have been doing since 2000, part of a seed collection is stored in the country of origin, and it's part of it that is sent to us for a kind of safety duplication. So it's another level of security. So yeah, we have repatriated seeds. We sent some seeds back to Australia after the last bushfires. We've also sent some seeds back to South Africa for a critically endangered species. The only site it was known from got burnt. The species was lost. So we've actually managed to bring that species back through propagating at Stellenbosch Botanic Garden, and they're actually putting the material back into its native habitat.
So I have a question about, distinguishing other seed banks, and you talked about seeds from the wild. And
Yep.
So are other seed banks using, I guess it would be cultivated, or breeding seeds. So, and how do you go about, choosing the seeds that you bring in? So you're working with I think 197 countries. How many countries? A lot of countries.
Yeah, since 2000, we've worked with 197 different countries and over 250 different organizations, not just to help them conserve their seeds, but to help improve their ability to be able to do that themselves. So to empower them to have the experience and technology to undertake that work in country. So for the agricultural gene banks, yes, they're looking at cultivated material, either straight from the fields or some of the land races or material around kind of agriculture and supporting that. For us, we used to kind of be governed by the 3 E's, we called them: endangered, endemic, and economically important, which today translates as plants that are threatened and plants that are useful. So those are really what we focus on, because we'd love to be able to conserve everything, but we can't. Currently, across the whole partnership, I think we've conserved around, more than 16% of all of the wild plants in the world, which is an achievement, but we'll never reach 100%, unfortunately. So you have to focus on those things which are either we're going to lose them soon or which have the greatest value to humans.
So this building is very unusual. This building is built to last for 500 years. I imagine, even though the Royal Botanical Gardens have been there a long time, I don't think they've been built to last 500 years. So how do you construct something like that?
It was a major project. We're also in an area of outstanding natural beauty in the southeast of England, so you can't kind of change the shape of the landscape that much. So they actually had to dig down a long way down in order to put the seed bank in, so that it's only a one-story building from the surface. And this is actually really great for our seeds because it means that they're in a vault which is underground, and it's built with reinforced concrete 0.5 meter thick. So that is where you get the kind of the bomb proof, and it's got radiation detectors. So if there was ever any radiation, it cuts off the air supply. It's also got flood trip wires, and we've got individual cold stores within the seed vault. They're a bit like, the walk-in cold store you'd have in supermarkets, kind of back of house kind of thing. We've got the proper bank vault door on the front as well. It's a very secure location.
Now, have you, obviously nobody's dropping a bomb on it, but have you had floods and, have you had challenging moments on it already?
Not so far, thankfully. Yeah, no, it's been okay. The main thing would be if we had a power failure, but we have solar voltaics on the roof which could power it anyway, and a backup generator, so we're doing okay.
How cold is it? It's really sub-zero? Is it sub-zero?
Yeah, it's -20.
Wow.
Yeah. So you have to get suited up to go in there and have the hat and sign a safety waiver and all of it.
Now, how many seeds is enough to protect a species, and what kind of container do you put them in?
So it's an interesting question. In our guidance, we would aim for our partners to collect 10,000 seeds from one population of a species and kind of collect across the whole of the population. So you're gathering all the genetic diversity that exists there. And the reason we say 10,000 is because we want to split the collection in half. So that's 5,000 each. And then because we know that by drying and storing the seeds at sub-zero temperatures, they can last for tens to hundreds of years past their normal kind of shelf life.
Mm-hmm.
So we wanted to factor in having enough seeds to be able to continue to send seeds out for use during that lifetime. And also we routinely take seeds out to do germination tests. And this is how we check that the seeds are still alive and doing okay. So we factored in the seeds for that. Reality, a lot of species you're never going to get 10,000 seeds for. So, if it's a rare and endangered species, we will store one seed. If that is all there is, then that is better than having no seed. But it just limits what we're able to do, because clearly we're never going to test that seed to see if it's alive until it's actually needed.
Now, are these seeds, tell us the kind of the value. Are they in the kind of environment as well as eating? Just so the audience really understands what these seeds do, what are they providing us with?
What a lot of people don't realize is that all life is dependent on plants. And I think this is because there's become a disconnect between our daily lives and the natural world. But plants, they provide our shelter, they provide our food, they provide our medicine. They also provide a lot of cultural services, just the well-being aspects of being in nature. And also a lot of religions have particular plants associated with them that are sacred. So there's all kinds of reasons and uses for the plants that we're conserving.
Now, how do you estimate how many wild plants there are? And do you have scouts that are out in the world looking for seeds? Like what's the operation like?
Yeah, so Kew brings out a report with scientists from across the globe called State of the World's Plants and Fungi. And in that each time there is an update on kind of estimating the number of plant species that exist. And that's based on all the science that goes on behind the scenes at Kew and at other organizations to kind of document and identify plants. And each year about 1,000 new plants are identified for science. Obviously other people knew about them already, but we've never scientifically described them before. So we're continually learning about new things. Unfortunately, some of the material that these new species are identified from was collected a long time ago and just hadn't been processed maybe. And so that species can already be extinct or critically endangered almost before it's named. It's kind of a race against time.
Like a place like Papua New Guinea where, there's a whole new discovery of animals, I imagine there must be a whole new discovery of plants as well. Yeah.
Yeah, there is. And actually, we have a really active team working in PNG. From our herbarium team, there's a lot of activity over there to document the plants in partnership with local botanists. And we're also trying to get some seed banking work going over there as well.
And Antarctica or the Arctic, are there plants in those places?
Yep. Yeah, I can say the Antarctic is the only continent where we've collected all of the plants that are native.
Yeah.
How many are there?
That's because I think there's only about 3.
Although when you dig down to the surface, don't they find, that it was once a totally different environment?
It was once a tropical forest, when it was not situated at the pole. But for the seed bank, we've collected from the Arctic to the Antarctic and from sea level to above 5,000 meters and every habitat in between. And it's one of the things that always amazes me is the enthusiasm and dedication of our staff and also our partners to go out to these remote, often locations. Well, sometimes it's remote, sometimes it's by the side of a motorway. There was one species we were looking for and they thought they weren't going to be able to find it. They were on a train at some point, looked out the train window and went, hang on, that's the species I've been looking for. So sometimes they're in very built up urban environments potentially, but sometimes they're super remote and you have to take a dugout canoe or an elephant or a helicopter to get there.
That same diversity exists just in, say, wildflowers in England. Aren't there just all sorts of different kinds of wildflowers, and there's always popping up a new kind that nobody's seen before?
Yeah, so we have a really active program in the UK. So the team that I manage is responsible for bringing the seeds into the seed bank. And we've got a UK team who are actively conserving the threatened flora across the UK. And also at Wakehurst, we've developed some wildflower meadows, restoring kind of natural habitat. We are in a chalk downland areas nearby as well. So we're helping with some partners with their restoration of these chalk downlands and getting the natural flora back there too. So these wild meadows and wildflowers are really important for pollinators. And so in that sense, they have that contribution to the surrounding agriculture, that if you've got a healthy wildflower area nearby, then it's going to service your crops as well.
I have a question around, how much is it the sort of environmental impact and how much of just natural evolution in, things dying out and extinction? I think it's important to, if you can gauge that. Yeah.
I mean, we talk about being in the 6th mass extinction, and it's because the current rates of loss of biodiversity are hundreds to thousands of times higher than they were in the fossil record. So it is down to human impact on the planet. And the 5 main drivers of loss of biodiversity, if I can remember them in order, is overexploitation of species, change in land and sea use, climate change, invasive species, and pollution. So they're all things we're causing.
It's hard to identify invasive species because we don't, there's the obvious ones, but, over time, don't these species end up taking over an area and then another species, how do we go back? How do we identify what an invasive species is?
There's various different ways. In a former life, I was a paleoecologist, and that's one of the ways that people identify invasives is to go back to a baseline, look at fossil pollen records and record what was there then. So before humans started moving plants around the planet, and then say, okay, so these things, they're not native, so they would be new, but then you could also identify invasives in that way as well. But I think also just understanding the biology of plants, their ecology, and how they reproduce and spread, and their tolerances to different environments will help you identify invasive species as well.
There are plants that like corn, corn has been domesticated over time, but it started as a wild species, a long time ago. Can we ever get those original species, and would they be candidates to be in the seed bank?
Those are definitely candidates for the seed bank, yeah. So we've just completed a 10-year program with the Global Crop Trust, and it was looking at exactly this because, as a global population, we're reliant on very few edible plants to make up most of our diet. And in fact, corn, maize, and wheat are the three that we're most dependent on. So it's really not a stable agricultural system. We need to add some diversity into that. So that's one thing, we should be eating more different plants. But the other thing is that those crops, like you say, for millennia have been bred by us. And so they've lost a lot of their genetic diversity, which means that they're not very able to adapt to the changing environments that they're experiencing. So we had a big program called Adapting Agriculture to Climate Change, or for short, the Crop Wild Relative Project, because what we really did was we took 28 important crops and forages and went and said, okay, well, what are the wild relatives of these species? These are things like cousins that would be able to easily interchange genetic material. And we had a massive program, 25 different countries were involved around the world. And they went out and collected more than 4,000 collections of these wild relatives from all corners of the earth, really. That's to provide us the genetic basis to breed resilience back into these crops. So we do go back and we find these kind of original versions which haven't had all of that diversity bred out of them. And just last year, I think we've sent 3,000 of those collections now out to agricultural research stations where they're growing on the plants. And we say it's characterizing them, looking at the traits that they possess. If it's drought tolerance, resistance to higher heat, whatever it is, salt tolerance that could be useful for helping our crops.
I have a question about the seeds that you sent back during a crisis. Was it Australia? Mm-hmm. So that it's sort of related. How are they doing? Are they hard? Did you send them back for what reason? Was it food? Was it to get, some coverage? What was the reason, and how did they fare?
Yeah, for this one particular species, it was a threatened pea, and the area that it grew in had completely burnt. The reason that we sent the seeds back is because Australia had actually sent us all of the seeds to conserve. We were talking about seed numbers in a collection before. Well, only 1,000 seeds had ever been collected. So they'd sent them all to us, and we sent back a quarter of them. And once all the official paperwork of border control, we know what immigration into Australia is like, had been completed, they've managed to grow them on, and it's had really successful germination. And then they've actually made that into a kind of a nursery within their nursery to get more seeds from the plants that they've had, so that they are now propagating multiple plants to put back in the wild. So it's about wild plant conservation and restoring a natural habitat, which then helps maintain that ecosystem and the biodiversity that's dependent on it.
So do you do a study on that? Because there's probably not very many cases of being able to do that. So do you learn things from that you can apply to other populations?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot of restoration work going on around the world, and a lot of global organizations which do pull these case studies together so that we can learn from what's gone well and equally from what hasn't gone well, because unfortunately in restoration you quite often get situations where it doesn't work out. Maybe the plants needed watering or something, they didn't survive for whatever reason back in the natural habitat. All of these little lessons get built up into improving practice, definitely.
Now, if 500 years from now, let's say that we're not around for some reason, but the seed bank has been continually running because of the solar panels and everything.
Yeah.
And I happen upon this place. Not that I'm 500 years old. I'm reborn 500 years from now.
Confused about the whole piece of
time travel by then,
Let's just say that I stumble upon the bank. How will I know what seeds are where or how to use it? Do you have to leave markers and things for future generations to understand it, or how do we think about that? Because this is longer than a human lifespan, and humans are notoriously bad at thinking longer than a human lifespan.
We would have to leave markers, because at the moment, all of you were asking earlier what we store our seeds in, and they're currently in glass jars, which got a tight seal on them, so no airflow, but we're moving to foil bags anyway. All that they have on them is the accession number. So it doesn't have the name of the species, it doesn't have where it came from, it has no information about what you are looking at. And the reason that we do that is, again, security, because we have very rare and valuable plants in our collections. So if somebody did stumble into our bank today, they wouldn't be able to walk out with what they were looking for, because it's also randomized between our 6 cold rooms where things are put.
Interesting.
In that
I
sense,
mean, wow,
unless
people,
you came in,
we really think there's a security
I want to hear
issue with people in the seed bank?
Yeah, I want to hear about that.
yeah, no, well, we have 24-hour security at the seed bank.
But somebody might try and steal all the seeds, steal some part of them?
Well, thankfully, nobody ever has tried, but we have to plan for that eventuality, because we're holding genetic material in trust for other countries.
Right.
So it has to be secure.
Right.
And also, I mean, a lot of the reasons that plants are, so, you know, some particularly ornamental or valuable plants are going extinct in the wild is because they're over collected. So there's always going to be someone who wants a trophy, right?
Right. So it's a black market. Is there a black market for this? You know, that's kind of what.
In plants, there definitely is, yeah.
Wow. You know, do you have to collect some soil so that if you have to repopulate it, you have the same, you know,
no,
for lack of
we
better
don't
description?
actually collect soil with any of our samples. But what is interesting is that a new area of research which is coming out is investigating the fungal associates with the seeds, both externally and within the seeds, because in the last few years we're really coming to realize that actually we say all life is dependent on plants, but all plants are dependent on fungi. So there's a lot we still need to learn about those relationships.
I'm still back with the black market of the seeds for a minute, because I was just sort of playing it out. So climate crisis, drought, etc. There could be sort of countries or nefarious players trying to get access to kind of regrow their environment, correct? I mean, that's in a really dark scenario. There would be fighting to get access to, right, to kind of regrow someone's culture.
But I think you can just ask for the seeds and they'll
they'd
send
be
them
able to ask for their seeds back and we just give them, so that should be all right.
Yeah. Now fungus, can fungus survive deep freezing?
It seems it can, yeah. So a study which came out last year showed that from some seeds extracted from the Millennium seed bank, they cultured them and found a variety of fungi that would grow on.
So you maybe already are collecting the fungus,
the necessary fungi with it. Yeah, exactly. So are we actually more a fungi bank than a gene bank? We have to discover that.
Right. You know, pollinators, you know, bees pollinate, you know, lots of seeds. I imagine there are bats, there's different things that pollinate seeds. Is it possible you can collect seeds that won't be able to be grown at some point in the future?
I think all the seeds that we have would be able to turn back into a plant. And that's why we do the germination test, so that we understand how to achieve that. But you do have a point. If you put these, you know, species back into an environment and they've lost their natural means of pollination, human intervention's not going to be possible on that scale. But it could be the other species could fulfill that role. Maybe they were traditionally, you know, there's a lot of plants which are generalists. There's some which are very specialist and would have one particular pollinator. In those cases, if they lost the pollinator, then yeah, they're not going to survive.
You know, the seed bank's not just a seed bank. Your seed bank also does a tremendous amount of research. So how do you focus on what would be a good research, you know, hypothesis within the seed bank?
Almost anything relating to the seeds would make a good hypothesis. I mean, we've had all kinds of things. Some of the research we do really underpins the science of seed banking. So trying to improve the methodologies and increase the longevity and understand all of those things. Some of the science is looking at dormancy. So a lot of seeds, if you try to grow them, won't grow straight away. And that's because in nature, the seeds have particular mechanisms to help them germinate at the correct time for them, so that when they're likely to survive. So do they need to overwinter before they'll germinate? So we have a lot of research into breaking complex dormancy in seeds. We also have research looking into, I mean, we recently sent some seeds into space to see what the impact of cosmic radiation would be on them, and also for, in the future, could people be able to grow plants in space?
Or if we're going to really try and colonize Mars, how would we get the seeds there?
Exactly.
And what did you find out? Do we know yet?
Yeah, no, they came back down. There was I think it was some apple seeds as well from Newton's apple tree, and they grew. So they survived the process.
Although when they grow in space, don't they grow in strange directions? And
I think they would, because of that zero gravity, the whole root shoot thing would get a bit messy. Yeah.
They talk about bringing the woolly mammoth back. And so they found some, bones, and they found some things relatively intact. But the microbiome of the woolly mammoth, the things that it was eating, when you say you're going to bring it back, well, it has to, if you don't eat the same things, it's like, what woolly mammoth are you bringing back? But the microbiome it was quite unusual, the plants that it was eating. So it isn't just bringing the plants back because it's nice for them to have them. They're part of the environment, and they have some relationship to the animals that are going to grow there. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, in terms of bringing the woolly mammoth back, I'm not sure what countries are going to want it roaming around. But,
well, they think that it'll crush
the woolly mammoth. The woolly mammoth comes up.
I'm not sure it's a good idea to bring it back, but they say it's a great idea because it crushes the something. But the point is, I'm thinking more just about animals living in their environment have gotten used to certain kinds of plants, and if those plants were gone, maybe that part of the ecosystem further up will collapse.
No, it does, and we can see that happening already, unfortunately, in areas that are being degraded, or forest that is being chopped down. And it's why in restoration, particularly in forest, we look for some key species to put in first, and often they're the ones that attract animals and birds. So they've got fruits that are edible, and those will then bring animals into a site, and they'll disperse other seeds into the site from surrounding areas. But completely. If you lose the plants on which animals depend, then the whole system collapses.
Some seeds can last a very long time. I was reading an article about a palm in Israel that grew. Like they found some seeds somewhere, and they grew this. I think I'm going to say it was like 1,000 years ago, and it's so they are quite amazing. They're quite resilient in some ways. Some seeds are. I mean, aren't they?
Yeah, no. I mean, seeds are incredible. I mean, they're a tiny plant inside this little package, which is built to withstand the environment until it gets the right space to grow. And I think the thing with the seeds in Israel is that that the climate there is very dry. So those seeds had clearly dried out and been kept in kind of not quite controlled conditions, but it wasn't, if they were in a tropical forest, they would not have survived 1,000 years. They'd have rotted. So that's why we have to have the conditions that we have in the seed bank. But no, seeds are incredibly resilient for the most part.
In the United States, we've seen some of our forests totally decimated by I'm going to say mites, or something that grew in the eastern forests and destroyed them. Is that, do you also keep tree seeds in there?
Yeah, we do. We've got a lot of tree seeds. In fact, we currently have a global tree seed bank program, because one of the things we discovered was that trees are really underrepresented in ex situ collections, so for conservation. And obviously that's because they're difficult. They're taking a long time to grow. And if you were going to grow them in a living collection, they're going to take up a lot of space. So we really wanted to have representative seed collections, but it also poses challenges for seed collectors. So, you have to either be a tree climber or take extending poles, which you try to get up through the canopy of this forest, depending on where you are and your health and safety regulations.
Yeah.
You got the photos of people balancing on top of vehicles to kind of...
Where do you take the seed from for the tree? Where are you getting it from? What part of the tree?
Redwood,
so you want to try and take it from across the whole crown, because you can get different pollinators coming into different sides. So the genetic diversity is actually different across the whole thing. So low level to high level and all across, which can be impossible to achieve, but that's what we're aiming for.
The redwoods, they're 600-700 feet. So to get up there and get the seeds is pretty complicated. I mean,
We've got some though. They're in the seed bank.
When you drive San Francisco, you drive around the area outside San Francisco, it's very beautiful. But what people don't realize is that those were all redwood forests, and they chopped them all down and sent them to San Francisco in the early 1900s, and then subsequently burned the city down with all that wood. So it's all gone. But it certainly is one of those first kinds of things when you think about conservation, like making sure that we're able to replant some of these things. How do you think we're doing on collecting? You said earlier, I think 16% of the biodiversity of the wild plants is there. How are we going to get that number to be higher? And are we doing a good job of doing that? Or,
I mean, we're still continuing to work, and our partners are really active. I'd say our main limitation, as with everybody, is funding. That we're completely reliant on philanthropic donations for our work. So with the current situation post-COVID and global changes in economies, then we just have to wait and see how that funding situation plays out, and whether people are going to take conserving biodiversity seriously enough to invest in it in the way that is needed.
Isn't, in a way, COVID itself an example of, getting rid of environment and then that spreading and these terrible things happening? Isn't it a sign for conservation?
Yeah, no, there's definitely a side to these viruses escaping the animal world into the human world as being related to natural environments being under pressure and animals moving into environments where they wouldn't otherwise have been, etc. So yeah, I think it has provided a wake-up call to people. And as well as that, I think through all the lockdowns and everything, people have really become to value outdoor green spaces a lot more than they probably did before, and really have started to connect back with nature a bit more than they had been doing previously, because their lives suddenly got a bit less busy. So I think that's a positive. That's the only positive I've seen so far, but I'm taking that as a positive.
Can I just ask you a question about your background? Because what are those orange seeds behind you?
Yeah, no, I'm not going to be able to name them all, sorry.
Oh,
but
okay.
They'll be poisonous, I can tell you that much.
Okay, they're beautiful. How do we get the public and policymakers and to really take this, like, what is required to get the funding that you need? Like, what is the story that needs to be told? Well, you have an audience hopefully here. So what is the story we need to tell?
Well, I think it is about our dependence on plants, and the fact that we are the ones who are causing the issues currently on this planet. If nothing else, we have a moral responsibility to be helping to conserve biodiversity, because we're not the only species that exists or has a right to stay, And then if you want to be selfish, then we're not going to survive unless the natural world survives, because we are part of the natural world.
That makes perfect sense. So people need to understand our relationship to the natural world. So thank you so much, Elinor, for coming on.
This is incredible.
No,
Thank you so
complete
much.
pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And people that want to learn more can go to the website, right? Will you just tell us exactly where to go?
Yeah, just www.qkew.org. Yep. And then you can find out more about our work. If you search Millennium Seed Bank, we will pop up and you can see all our projects and what we're up to.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Very much.
It's
lovely to speak with you.